Thank you for joining us on another episode of Latter Gay Stories podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Ashworth. Another great podcast episode we have for you today. We are discussing the journey outside of the closet and into authenticity and honesty. Today's guest, Todd Jones, will sit down with us, and we're going to discuss what life was like coming out later. We often hear coming out stories that happen early as a youngster or through the teenage years, even into the mission. But we'll find out that Todd came out much later in his experience and where that took him as he journeyed through his faith, his sexuality, and eventually through his experience in life. We thank you for joining us on this episode. If you are watching on a video version, we invite you to comment as we go through the episode. Share your thoughts and feelings and questions, and we will definitely jump in and answer those. And if you are listening to us on an audio version, we, as always, invite you to subscribe to this channel to help us build bigger and stronger bridges between the LDS and LGBT communities by sharing, subscribing, and liking these episodes. With that aside, we want to welcome to the podcast Todd Jones. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm excited to hear your story. It's a really unique story, because it's non-traditional in terms of how we unpack our identity.
Right.
You and we'll kind of discuss this and walk through this path, but the interesting part about your story that I found most fascinating was you didn't come out until much later in life,
right,
which is contrary to so many people's experience.
Right.
Often we hear, oh, I knew I was gay when I was 5 or 6 or 7. We're very young, but your story leads you into your 30s when you got to that point where you start putting all the puzzle pieces together.
30s and 40s.
And that's an interesting part of this discussion, and that's why I thought this is a really great podcast episode.
Well, I'm excited to be here.
So thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where does the story start?
From childhood, you want to start there?
Let's start childhood.
Okay.
What, born of goodly parents?
Born of goodly parents. I'm a BYU baby, born in Provo.
Post semester?
Yeah, right. Born in January, I think between semesters probably. Moved to Pocatello, Idaho when I was little. We lived in Burley, Blackfoot, Montana for 2 years, and then back to Pocatello. And that's basically where I consider myself from, is Pocatello. I'm the oldest of 7 kids. 4 brothers and 2 sisters. And great family, not a shy family, a respectful family, sometimes not a lot of filter between brain and mouth, but it's usually a humor, and we get along pretty well. But
so, what were your aspirations growing up as a kid? From Pocatello, the world is your oyster at that point.
Yeah, I didn't really know. I ended up going to Rick's College because a lot of my friends were going there, and so I didn't really know what to do. I didn't really have a plan. But I went there for 1 semester, and then just things kind of fell apart. I had a friend that I met right after high school, or actually during high school, from a different school, and he was going up there, and I was kind of interested in him at the time. I don't know if I would use those terms then, but at the time, wanted to hang out with him and be his friend, and so he was going up there, and so I followed him up. And we ended up not being roommates, which is probably a good thing. And just was there for a semester, and things just didn't work out. Financially, things were tight, and I don't think I was ready for college at the time. I was a little bit of a late bloomer. And so came home, worked for about, I think 8 or 9 months, 10 months, maybe a year, and then went on a mission.
When you went to Rick's, what was your intention to study, or what field were you interested in?
At the time, I studied, for 1 semester before my mission, I studied design. I've always been interested in at the time I was interested in fashion design. I worked in the fashion industry a little bit. The general design and color and composition, everything like that. Just the basic classes is what I took at the time. But it's kind of stuff that's followed me through my life. I have an interest in art and color and,
And no, looking back
design.
now, stereotypical, oh, well, hello, there was a flag.
Yes. During that semester, the friend that I followed up there, we kind of had a falling out, and I really had a hard time with that. It took me probably 2 or 3 months to get over the emotional trauma of that. And I was young, I was 18, and I just felt like, looking back on it, I've always told myself I was clueless, I didn't know what I was doing. why that was so important to me. But yeah, he basically says, I can't be your friend anymore because I need to go on a mission, and you're too much of a temptation. So we just kind of parted ways, and we've kept in touch. We're friends now, and he's married to his husband in Boston, and we've been friends for most of our lives. But there was that. I kind of floundered around a little bit. I had friends back at home, of course, and went back home and worked and saved money for a mission and went on a mission.
Let's talk about your mission life. Where did you serve?
Virginia, the Virginia Roanoke Mission, which I don't believe exists anymore. It's been split up so many times. But Virginia, Southern Virginia, Charlottesville, Blacksburg, Roanoke, where else? Stanton, Virginia, and Blacksburg. Did I say that? Yeah, so Southern Virginia, basically.
How was your mission experience? What was mission life like?
I think pretty standard, pretty normal. I think nothing really stands out. I struggled a little bit. I worked, and I was a good missionary, and I tried to be obedient. I wasn't perfect, but if I'm being honest, it was boring a lot of times. Mm-hmm. We knocked a lot of doors, and it's in the Bible Belt, and it wasn't very fruitful and everything. I had some good experiences, and I had some great companions and stuff, but there was a lot of boredom, frankly, which as a hyper child, that was difficult for me, but it was great. I'm glad I went. I felt like it matured me quite a bit. It kind of put me on a path, a trajectory that I'm grateful for now. But at the time it was just kind of a standard mission. I came home. Interestingly enough, I don't know. Speaking of the mission and church and testimony and everything, I don't know that I ever didn't have a testimony. I don't ever remember gaining a testimony. It just always seemed like this is what it was, and I'm grateful to my parents for that. They kind of always taught us this is the way it is. A little sheltered, to be honest, but I just never questioned certain aspects of the gospel, the doctrine, and stuff. And just I came back from my mission, kind of feeling the same way. I think it was clueless before. Just to give you an idea, it didn't dawn on me that the rest of the world didn't read the Book of Mormon until I was a senior in high school. Because with the scriptures, everybody reads the scriptures. And my mom, I had a conversation with my mom about that, and I was like, oh yeah, well, I guess that makes sense. And so it's just kind of sheltered, and again, kind of lived in the Mormon bubble, and came back from my mission, worked for several months, then went back to Rick's College, and had a completely different experience. I was an Elders Quorum president the first year, and then I was elected to the social vice president, the student body officer, my second year. And it was great. I loved it. It was wonderful. I loved it up there. I hated the cold, but the social life was just spectacular. I'd throw parties. I remember I threw a luau from my office, threw a luau. I think at the time there were 7,500 students up there. We threw a luau that a little over 6,000 people came to.
Wow.
So we had the Polynesian Club do performances and everything, and it was great. It was amazing. So it was fun. It was a great 2 years of my life. I loved it. I loved Rick's College. And then transferred to BYU, and pretty stereotypical again. BYU was harder for me. I think I was kind of a big fish in a little pond up in Rexburg, and I came to BYU, and there's this massive lake, and I was kind of a nobody, and kind of used to knowing everybody on campus and not knowing anybody on campus. And BYU seemed very city, very kind of impersonal to me when I first got there. So I struggled. I met some friends and everything, but I just didn't seem right. I remember at Rick's College I had something going on all the time, every day, every evening. There was something social going on. BYU wasn't like that. It wasn't like that at all.
What was dating life like? Were you dating at Rick's? Were you dating at BYU?
I dated at Rick's like crazy. And an interesting phenomenon that was going on at the time, because there were more women than men at the time. I don't know what it's like now, but I got asked out all the time. I'd have 2 to 4 dates a week. And half I would ask and half I would get asked. And a date would be like a picnic or go hiking, it was nothing fancy or anything, but a lot of socializing. I dated. I never really felt anything. I think high school and college dating was to be socially accepted. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is the path. This is what we all do. I'm supposed to date and everything. And at Rick's College, I did have a relationship with a girl, and we're still friends. She lives in Iowa, and it was romantic, but it was more social, and she ran for student body office the year after me, and she was elected, and just kind of that whole thing. And then,
do you think the church, was there any influence in the church in terms of the way the church likes people to date? And were you making a correlation between what was traditional dating norms within Mormonism?
Yes.
And then maybe a self-identity that was creeping through, and this feeling that, so you had mentioned, well, I dated, but nothing really, no big connection.
It's a social connection, and I loved the humor and the personalities and the social aspect of going out and spending time together and being seen together,
Where you weren't closeted.
I wasn't even out to myself.
So you had no idea what.
No.
So I maybe what I'm getting at is, you look at all these dates saying, well, the church says when I get that burning in the bosom, that special one will happen. Then
right.
That's what you were looking for the whole time, and it just wasn't happening.
No, I left Rexburg, and I told this woman, I said, let's find out what happens. I guess we're kind of not officially together because we're not in the same town. And I said, you've got a year of excitement ahead of you, and enjoy that and have fun, everything. I'm going to go to BYU and try to enjoy that. And within about, I don't remember the time frame, in that year, she started dating a guy who was from Iowa, also back home. And he was at BYU, interestingly enough, as was I, and I didn't know anything about this. And by the time she ended up to, I don't remember if she went to BYU. I don't remember. She came to Utah for school. I don't remember where she went. I want to say Utah State. I don't remember. But by then they were engaged, and she kind of told me, and I was like, wow, that's pretty quick. But that was that. And
as is most BYU engagements.
Yeah, right. Just kind of happened, and so I mourned the loss, but not traditionally. It was a social thing for me. She was a beautiful woman. She was a lot of fun, funny. We joked around. One time she sneaked into we didn't live in dorms, right? I lived in a basement apartment with roommates, and so she connected with my roommate, and she went into my closet and took all my clothes, and she took some of them in her car, but she hid some of them in that apartment. So I went to my closet that night, and there was nothing in there. So I knew, and it was funny, and we kind of practical joke each other back and forth. But it was that. It was kind of a socially romantic relationship. Very kind of to be seen. I liked her. I liked her, and I thought I was falling in love with her. But I don't think I knew what that meant. I don't at the time, but I kept waiting to feel these feelings of strong passion and attraction and everything. It never happened.
Didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So you end up graduating from BYU in what?
Sociology. I graduated in sociology. My BYU experience was difficult. I worked at the MTC at night, and I worked in security. I was a security guard. That was the official title. My job was to walk through the dorms of the missionaries and just kind of see what was going on. I'd stop and talk with missionaries, encourage them to be obedient, just casual, informal conversations, make sure that pizza hadn't been sneaked in or anything, but just stuff like that.
Well, you didn't check our dorm.
Yeah, I know. Well, there was a lot of pizza that got sneaked in. I think it's so different now than the way it used to be, but yeah, I did that. I also did EFY when I was at BYU. So the first year I was there, I didn't, but fall of '88 was my first year of EFY, and I was an EFY counselor for 6 years, which is a little longer than normal. But that was my salvation for BYU.
Why do you say that?
It was so social, and it was so safe, and people loved each other, and there were hugs, and there was closeness, and there was this social bond, and we cared about each other. And
it took you back to the Ricks days.
Kind of, yeah. It was just like, I was a popular counselor, but most counselors were popular, and I loved, being in that environment where we kind of loved each other, and we kind of built each other up, and we complimented each other, and we talked good about each other behind each other's back, and oh, who's your counselor? Oh, she is the best. You're so lucky, stuff like that. And I just enjoyed that. I felt authentic. I felt real. I felt connected. I felt bonded to these people. And honestly, my life would be completely different if I had not done EFY. It would be different. I would never met my ex-wife. I would never had kids. I would not be a professor. None of this. I think of my closest friends, my closest long-term friends. still to this day, 2/3 of them are from EFY. Either they were my kids, my participants, that I was their counselor, or they were other counselors. And so I'm still in touch with a lot of them, and it just kind of become lifelong friendships, So EFY was huge.
Yeah,
pivotal for me. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you graduate from BYU with a degree in sociology. Where does that take you employment-wise? Where did you
I
go?
was absolutely, positively tired of the weather in Utah. I was born and raised in Idaho and Utah, but I am not a winter, snow, cold person. I don't like it. I'm a lizard. If it's 100 degrees, I'm happy. I like the heat. And I moved to Hawaii. After EFY that fall, I moved to Hawaii.
Which island?
Maui. Lived in Maui for about 6 months, and then moved back. Then
You and the Nene birds.
Yeah. And then moved to Arizona. I knew very few people there. I had some EFY contacts there, so I basically hung out there. Got a job. Only stayed for like 9 months that first time. Came back to Utah to do EFY one more year. I think that was my 6th year. Went back to Arizona and got a job as an employment agency. Basically, I was hired to be the manager of a temp service. And so I did that for 3-4 years. It was a hard job, and it was very demanding, and I made good money, but I didn't ever have enough time to enjoy it because I worked so many hours. So I kept looking for jobs, and every time I'd look for a job, any job that I wanted required a master's degree, which I didn't have at the time. So long story short, I'd been speaking for BYU, for EFY, and I either at EFY or youth conferences, we'd go out and do those. So and it finally just dawned on me, why don't I teach? Why should I be a professor? Why didn't I ever think of that? And so long story short, I researched it. I didn't really know what the discipline of communication was. I had not heard of it. So I thought, sociology, I'm going to go to sociology first and talk to them. And I wanted to study relationship theory and identity, and they steered me toward communication. And oddly enough, the Hugh Downs School of Human Communication at Arizona State University, which at the time, as I understand it, was one of the top communication programs in the country, which was exciting, but thought, how in the world am I going to get into this program? Was just 3 miles down the road at Arizona State. So I was advised to take classes as a non-degree seeking grad student. I took 2 classes from influential professors, got letters of recommendation, told them I'm here to prove myself worthy to go to grad school to be accepted. And there were about 150 applicants, and 12 of us were taken, and I networked my way in. That's what it was. I mean, I didn't get in on my brilliance or my past. I got in on networking. And
but I was the coolest EFY counselor at BYU.
Right. So I think that helped me, and I had been speaking, and I had worked at Disney, and so stuff like that. So that helped,
So let's fast forward to the part where you start dating for real, because one of those dates ended up into a proposal.
Yeah. In Arizona, I dated I made myself date. It was an arduous process. I had a roommate, and he was like a brother to me. We're still pretty good friends, and we lived together for several years. And in fact, both of our roommates moved out at the same time. So he moved in with me into the other room, and then I bought a condo, and then he moved with me and rented a room from me. And he was the same way. He didn't want to date. But I'm like, we have to date. We're going to be together. You're going to be you and I until we're 95 if we don't start dating. And so I'm like, okay, by Wednesday, we made a rule that by Wednesday we have to have dates set up for the weekend. So we'd be like, right, Eye of the Tiger, let's do this,
No Facebook, no online apps.
No. So we just had the Word, what did they call it back then?
The directory?
The directory, but with the catalog, the shopping guide, I think they called it,
The classified, that's what I like to call it.
So we had our Word directory, and we had a few others because there's a lot of singles wards in Arizona, especially on the east side in the Phoenix Valley. And so we would just make sure there was a party. We tried to go to a party or a social activity and have a date every weekend. And so we did that, and nothing really happened, and nothing really happened. And finally I went to this, it was at a pool party, and this woman came up to me, and she's like, hey, I know you from EFY. And I'm like, oh, hey, because that happened all the time, And I thought, what's your name? And she told me, and she's like, yeah, I was a participant one year, and then the year after that, we were counselors together in a regional back east. And so I knew what she was, but I was a little bit distracted at that activity. There was something else going on, and so I ran into her in an institute class at ASU. And she said the closing prayer, and I went and talked to her, and I said, how do we know each other? And she literally rolled her eyes at me, and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm so bad at this, you know. And
Yeah,
so
you're the guy who ghosted me, remember?
Right. So long story short, I asked her out, and it went really fast. And I don't recommend this to anyone. In fact, I talk about this in my classes all the time. But we dated for 5 weeks, got engaged, and got married 3 months later, which I do not recommend to anyone.
See, that's the influence of BYU still.
Yeah, and so
through.
I mean, look, I was 35 when we met, and you know the whole Brigham Young, you're a menace to society, and there's all that and everything. And so I felt pressure from family and the church and society. And interestingly enough, so many of my friends in Arizona at the time we were like in our 30s. You know, we had parties together every weekend, and there was a huge group of people that were all single in our 30s. In about a 3-year period, almost all of us got married, and we remained friends. And we remained friends, and it was a good thing. We spent time together, had dinner parties together, and everything. That was good. So Arizona was good to me, and I loved it. I finished grad school. So we met during grad school and got married and all that, everything. And it freaked everybody out at school, I'm sure.
What was she studying?
She was done. She has a degree from BYU in community health. And she ended up teaching elementary school at a charter school for 2 different years in Arizona. And then I was hired as a professor in Arizona, or in California, and we moved. My master's degree is in communication, studying identity and relationships specifically. But we moved to California to Bakersfield, which I'd never heard of Bakersfield before I interviewed there. I flew out there. I didn't know where it was or if I'd known anybody there. And I went out there and interviewed. It was late in the interview season. I interviewed one day. The next day they made me an offer. We had 6 weeks to go to 2 family reunions, if I remember right, 2 family reunions, 2 high school reunions. I had 6 BYU speaking assignments. We had to rent our house out and buy a house in Bakersfield. And we had a newborn baby. In fact, the day that I got a call to interview, my ex-mother-in-law answered the phon. It was the day we brought my daughter home from the hospital, was the day that I got a call from Bakersfield College to interview. And so it was a whirlwind. New baby and everything, it was crazy. So we did the best we could. We found renters. I went out. The baby was sick, so my ex-wife couldn't go with me. And so I went out there, and she basically said, here's a list of what I want and what I don't want in a house. And so I did the best I could. I found a house, and we bought it, and we moved. And I started teaching. And I have loved my career. It's gotten better every year. I'm senior faculty now, so I kind of pick my schedule and my classes and everything, so that's been nice. But with a few exceptions, it's been a fantastic experience. Though I will say that the move, because I hadn't been in a normal ward for 20 years, since high school. So I went from, Mission to Ricks College to BYU to Arizona, where I was in singles wards forever. And then I got married, and even the married ward that I was in, normal ward that I was in, was 80% married students, college students, because it was close to the campus. And so it was very transitional. It's kind of a revolving door. And so I didn't ever feel like I was in a normal ward. And then we moved to California, and I'm all of a sudden in this normal ward. And I find myself really struggling. Like socially, we'd have events that we'd go to, and people would have us over for dinner and everything. I just didn't relate. I feel like, sometimes I remember thinking these people are so old, and I realized they're younger than me. But they just felt like, it just didn't feel social. It didn't feel, I don't know, this kind
all
of
the things that you were used to.
Yeah, just kind of this youthful social life that I had grown accustomed to for the last 20 years. And so I struggled. It was hard. And I met some friends, and I had friends at work, students, I had students that were my buddies and friends and everything. But yeah, struggled. It was a struggle.
Now, you said earlier in the podcast you referenced ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
So you marry, you have...
No. I have one ex-wife.
Right.
Yeah.
But so with your one ex-wife, you get married, you have your daughter, and then another...
20 months later, I had a son.
Son comes along.
Yeah.
And at what point do you start saying, this isn't working? Let's kind of dive into that. And
sure.
And if your sexuality had something to do with that, or if it was factors completely separate.
Yeah, they were separate actually. And the first half of our marriage, we were married a little under 9 years. And the first half of our marriage I thought was great. She had commented a time or two that the first year was really difficult, which I suppose it was, here and there trying to get used to each other and everything.
Which is typical for many marriages.
Right. But in my mind, the first half of the marriage, first 4 years, were fine. And then the second half wasn't really intimate. After a while, we became roommates, and I tried everything. And I went to counseling, and we went to counseling, and nothing was happening. We're not a match. From the very beginning, we're not a match. We should have known that. If we would have dated a decent amount of time, we would have known that. In fact, at one point, we were considering postponing the wedding for a few months. And if we would have done that, we would have never gotten married. But so, almost 9 years into the marriage, in fact, I think it was January 9th, 2009. I still remember, 3 days before my birthday. We sat down. And I said, "Look, we need to do something about this. I feel this is not happening." I said, "We need to go into relationship boot camp. Let's turn the TV off for a month and read our scriptures and read relationship books, and go on one of those couples retreats for a weekend where they work on your relationship and everything." I had no idea where to get a hold of that, but I'm sure we could find one. And I said, "Or we need to separate or get divorced." And she said, "I pick separation." My jaw dropped. I'm like, "Really?" I said, "You don't want to try?" She's like, "No, I'm past the point." Yeah. Now, mind you, we'd bicker, but there were never fights. There was no violence. There was no alcohol. I mean, when we actually did get divorced, the courts and the lawyers couldn't believe there was no alcohol, no police report, no drugs, no violence, none of the typical things people get divorced for. Not even money issues.
Just lack of connection.
Right. So I said, the next day I said, "Are we just separating for a while? Just kind of see what happens and see if we're going to get back together?" And she said, "No, I don't think so." So I said, "Okay, so we're getting a divorce." We were standing in the laundry room. I still remember this. "So we're getting a divorce." She said, "Yeah, I think so." So I accepted that. But 2 days later, on my birthday, we took the family out to eat for my birthday. I was beside myself emotional. I couldn't function. And I really, for the next 2 weeks, and I was starting a semester, and I had a student group that I ran. I was just in a daze. I barely made it. I almost didn't go to school that first week. And I thought, what am I going to do? Stay home with her?
Unbearable.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. So we filed for divorce. I filed for divorce. It was nasty. She I filed. I think it was strategic. Her sister coached her through this, who'd been through a few divorces herself, and I filed for divorce, and they responded, and she asked for full physical and full legal custody of our children. And before that happened, about 3 months into this, because we lived together for 18 months after we filed for divorce, which was horrible. I don't recommend that to anyone. And about 3 or 4 months into it, she says, "I'm just going to take the kids and go." I said, "The hell you are." And I said, I'm calling my lawyer, and she called her lawyer, and we found out that that's some form of kidnapping. You can't take children away from the parent. It's not dangerous against their will. And so that didn't happen, and it was hard. We'd go to court, come home to the same house. Mm. And we had 6 battles, and I won 3 and she won 3. And one of the ones that she won, I'm glad she won. I wanted them to stay in school in our area. She wanted them to go to school on the other side of town, which was where I now live. And there are better schools over there, and so that was in long hindsight,
Choose your battles.
Yeah, it's better. So we went on vacation. I took the kids to Idaho on vacation. She moved out during that vacation, and I came back.
Did you let the kids were aware?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me back up a little bit. We had to tell the kids, and it was that was the worst moment of my life. And they were only 7 and 9, I'm thinking.
So young.
Yeah. And so we sat down, and I just said, I don't even think I used the word divorce. I said, your mom and dad are not going to live together anymore. We're not going to be married anymore. And my daughter has a strong personality. She marched out. She says, this is not happening. And she marched out and she stomped her foot and everything. My son said, and this still haunts me today, he said, who's going to take care of us? And I cried and I held him. I said, oh, you'll always be with me or your mom. And I held him, and it was horrible. And Ellie, and I held her, and same thing. But we got through that, and she moved out, and I was pretty apprehensive to go back to that house that was semi-empty, because we had decided who was getting what. She took a lot of the furniture, so I went back to an empty house that was usually pretty tidy and clean. We had a cat that she took with her, and it's like, I know she didn't do this, but it's like she went through the house and spread crap everywhere, like cat hair or junk, or I don't know. It was a disaster. It was like, I'd been gone for a week and a half, and it's like 10 homeless people moved in with 100 cats. It was a disaster. So I started cleaning the house, and I braced myself for an emotional breakdown. I thought, I'm just gonna be a moment where I'm gonna have this. And the next day she came and picked up the kids. I'm in a new house. Here are the rules for my house. You can't come over to my house. You can't come into my house. Okay. And she left. And I thought, all right, I'm alone. It's summer. I'm not teaching. Let's have our emotional breakdown. So I literally sat there for a minute, thought, okay, I should probably cry now and kind of get it out and get it over with and everything. And nothing happened. And I thought, well, I'm going to clean the house. So I turned the music on louder than she would ever let me, and got in my underwear, and I cleaned the house, And I never had my emotional breakdown, ever. And although we have a moderately good relationship now, it depends on the day, and she would say the same thing. I've never missed her, not 1 second. I don't mean that to be derogatory toward her. We were not a match, and she would say the same thing. She's not missed me 1 minute at all, either. And she married a man that she should have married in the first place. They're compatible and they're together, and I don't know much about it because I don't want to know, and they seem great. And,
yeah, you mentioned you were roommates, you were friends, and that was the extent of the relationship.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, that was kind of it and everything. But so I filed for divorce in January of 2009, and I came out to myself in like October, November of 2009. Almost a year later.
Yeah, so that little bit of time there. What were the events that led up to that coming out experience?
I think the people at work and at church said, as soon as you're divorced, I've got this woman for you. She's perfect for you. And I thought about that because there are several old girlfriends and female friends that I'd had that had this more bubbly personality, kind of fun, almost Utah personality that was more conducive and compatible with my personality, which my ex-wife doesn't. We're not personality compatible. And I wondered if that would have happened, if it would have been any different. I don't know that would be any different, but anytime anybody would say, I've got this woman for you, my stomach would just knot up. It's like, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to do that again. I'm not interested in that. But I also knew, because I'm a relationship professor, it's what I talk about every day, I am not wired to be alone. I'm not wired to, it's not my wiring. It's not who I am. I'm a relational person. I'm relationally focused, and I just knew that I couldn't do that. I couldn't be with a woman again. So I started thinking on all the past girlfriends and relationships that I'd had, and I did have a kind of sort of romantic relationship with a guy right after high school. We met in high school, and we were student body officers at different high schools. We met and kind of had this relationship. I don't really know what even to call it or anything. But I kept thinking back to that and thought, well, of all the, and I wrote it off. Most of my life I wrote it off because I thought, I was a kid. Didn't know what I was doing. I was immature and clueless. And
childhood experience.
Right. That's what I thought it was. But I thought, of all the relationships that I've had in the past, that was the one that seemed to mean the most to me. And so I need to explore this. And I remember watching Will and Grace and seeing Jack, on the show and thinking, well, if that's gay, then I don't really think that I'm gay, because I mean, it's funny to me, but I don't really relate to that. That's not my personality or anything. And I thought, I don't know. I mean, because I had the media version, especially the late 1990s, early 2000s media version of a gay man, the flamboyant, marching in a rainbow Speedo, French kissing on camera just to make a point and everything. And I thought, I don't relate to that at all. I don't want to see that at all. And just kind of floundered around a little bit and everything. I finally, at the point, I went to this convention, one of my academic conventions that I go to every year, and had a conversation with an officer, and who was out and proud and gay. And in the discipline, social sciences, there are lots of gay people and lots of weird people, and some are weird gay people.
I was just saying, there's definitely a combination of both.
There are combinations, but this guy's pretty crazy. I mean, he's funny. He's one of my best friends now. But we talked, and I told him, I said, I'm here's where I am, and he's a known scholar, and so we talked, and he really kind of put some ideas into my head, and I thought, I really need to explore this, and so I met because I felt like it was safer and cleaner somehow. I thought, I'm just gonna meet guys on Facebook, which I did. And the first time I met a guy, and first time I kissed a guy, other than right after high school experience, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so different. And I just had this, almost this avalanche of thoughts, and oh my gosh, I'm not straight. Are you kidding me? And I had to really come to terms with that, and really kind of think about what that meant and how that felt and everything. And mind you, I'm still living in the same house with my soon-to-be ex-wife. And so I'm coming out to myself and trying to deal with her and the divorce and everything. So there's a lot going on.
What was your religious brain telling yourself as you were navigating this coming out experience?
One of my biggest concerns is that if I do this, I'm not going to be able to baptize my kids. And again, that's social. It meant a lot to me to make that happen, but that was hard.
So the first thing on your mind was not your own experience, it was that of others.
Not so much. Most of this divorce and separation to me was about the kids, and how are the kids going to be? What's our relationship going to be like, in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And I've always tried to think of my children, even though they're children, as adults, future adults. What kind of conversations, what kind of memories are they going to have of me and our interactions, when they're adults? And so I wanted to handle that, really well and everything. I don't know. I don't know. I don't remember, or I don't think that was at the forefront of my mind, other than my kids. That was what I was worried about.
So you're living with your soon-to-be ex-wife, socially trying to understand your own sexuality, but at minimum, you're not completely heterosexual.
Right. And so I was having conversations with gay men on Facebook, and I had a conversation with a guy in Canada. I don't remember the name or anything. Don't know. It was just kind of asking questions and what does this mean? And I'd left Facebook on, and I was at work, and she found it. She printed it, and she gave it to her lawyer. And a few weeks later, oddly and randomly, her father flew out from Virginia to stay with us overnight. And we went to court the next day. The judge cleared the courtroom, and her lawyer outed me on the witness stand in court, which was one of the least pleasant experiences of my life, I will say. I was embarrassed, mortified, and furious.
How old were you?
45, 46, yeah. And I just thought, this is so no one's business. I don't even have this defined in my head. I am not claiming to be gay at this moment. I don't know where I am. I'm figuring this out. And I did think of old girlfriends, and I'm not repulsed by a woman, and I hadn't really gotten there yet. And remember, I'm still dealing with the drama and the trauma of the divorce. It was traumatic for me.
And the very real experience of navigating your own sexuality.
Right.
You had not arrived at any place,
right?
And that was the journey.
So I had to sit down with her and her dad that night. I don't know why. To this day, I don't know. He was just there for emotional support. I mean, it's not like there was no violence in our relationship ever. I don't know if she thought I was going to beat her up. I mean, she's tough. She'd have bludgeoned me. If I would never do that. That's not my personality at all, or hers. But I mean, I don't know if she thought I was dangerous. I don't know what she thought or why she needed her dad there. But he flew out. I was not happy about it, but he was there. And so that was frustrating. That she pried into that and everything, and it was battle. She kept notes on every little flaw that I had, and there were distortions in the court. Courts always distort things, and California courts are the worst. If you go to hell, in the eternities, if you go to hell, you're going to go to divorce court in California, which never ends. And divorce in California takes forever. It took 2.5 years to get divorced.
Ooh, great. That's really great.
Yeah.
Let's focus the next few minutes of the podcast directly on that coming out experience and how that unfolded for you.
Okay.
So you're randomly talking to guys on the internet, trying to better understand their experience and your experience at the same time, and now you're formulating a plan, and starting to put puzzle pieces together.
I did.
That relationship started. I mean, you mentioned that you started feeling things and almost sparks or fireworks or this is now.
Well, there were two aspects of that: the fireworks and the coming out. And so I had to kind of do that. I wanted to do that strategically. I mean, I had a friend from BYU, Rick's and BYU, who came out on Facebook to everyone at the same time, family included. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not doing that. So I made a list of the 5 most important people that I needed to come out to first, just to deal with this, just to kind of like figure this out. The first person I came out to was a friend of mine in LA, and pretty progressive, LDS, but fairly progressive. And I said, you're the first. I need to talk to you. I was in town. And I said, let's go for a walk. We took the dog for a walk. And I told him, and he's very supportive. He's still one of my best friends. And I said, you're the guinea pig. You're the first person I'm telling because I knew you wouldn't freak out. And he did. And he's been totally supportive and great. We're very close. And then I had to tell the person I consider my best friend, who oddly his name is, my 2 best friends' names are Todd and Todd, so it's Todd and A Todd. And there's another Todd that I'll talk about in a minute. But I had to call my best friend Todd, Dr. Todd, and tell him, and it was hard. He's a 0 or 1 on the Kinsey scale. He's very straight. And it was hard for him. He struggled with it. But and
when you were coming out and when you were telling them, were you saying, I'm bisexual?
No, I said I'm not dating women anymore, or I've decided I'm going to date men. And it was hard for him. And I said, it was so awkward. Even though he was literally like a sibling to me, it was awkward. I just said, I need to say something that's really awkward. I said, I've never had those feelings for you as my best friend. I've never looked at you that way. I've never thought those thoughts or fantasized or anything. I know that's really stupid to say, but I just need to say that. Just get it out there. He's like, that's cool, whatever. But the conversation was okay, and we ended on a good note and everything. But 3 days later, he called me. He's like, I'm good. It's like, no problem. It's like, we got this. And
what would explain his
I don't
shift?
know. I think that he figured, like, look, sex and romance had nothing to do with our relationship before, so why would it now?
Yeah.
And I remember early in our friendship, we met on New Year's Eve, 1999. So we've been friends for that long, and I think that's what it was, 1999, and 88 to 99, right? And what was the question again?
I just wanted to know what shifted in his world. That he went from, thanks for telling me, to, we're good.
I think that he just figured that didn't really have anything to do with him. I think he just, he's mature, he's intelligent, he's a doctor, he's educated.
He got it.
Yeah. I just said, I don't want you to feel threatened or uncomfortable or anything. And we talk on the phone at least once a week. We took our kids to Hawaii together last summer. I mean, he's, been through some things too. He's divorced, so we've been through 3 weddings and 2 divorces together.
There you go. You got history.
Yeah, so he's great. My other friend, Pilot Todd, I I told him, and his brother's a therapist here in Utah and is very gay friendly. And so Pilot Todd is educated in that area. And so I kind of had a similar conversation, though he accepted it right away. He's like, we're good. So in fact, it's interesting because he's very straight also, and we have some very hilarious, not shareable conversations.
Not for this family-friendly podcast.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But we'll text because he flies a lot as a pilot, and so they have a lot of free time. So he'll text me and ask me questions, and I'm like, "Are you sure you want to talk about this?" And I'm like, I'll tell you. But so it's sometimes it's relational, sometimes it's sexual, sometimes it's how does this feel? What is it? How does this work? What if this happens? And so
a friendship.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah,
he's great and everything. One of the other on that list also was one of my colleagues. She was one of the colleagues that was in the interview that hired me. And she's very LGBT friendly, and she's very active in the LGBT community in Bakersfield. And I said, Helen, can I talk to you for a minute? And she said, yeah, come in, have a seat. And I said, Helen, I think I'm gay. And she said, oh, honey, you're the last to know. And so that's kind of a funny story that I tell all the time. But it took me a while to come out to everyone at work, but I needed to just kind of test the waters. I called my other friend, Todd that I went to high school with, who was the senior class president. I think he was the captain of the football team. He married the head cheerleader. He was that guy. 2 years later, he's like, yeah, I'm gay. Sorry. And so, long story short, he met a partner in LA. They lived in LA. And they have a son and everything. And we were in touch we were friends. We were in student government together. We were friends-ish. We knew each other. But at one of the reunions, we kind of connected and kind of bonded and everything. And a few years later, I called him and I said, yeah, I think I'm not straight. He's like, I wondered when I was going to get this call. I'm like, oh, well, it seems like everybody else knew but me, and I truly didn't know. That's hard for some people to believe, but I really didn't put two and two together. So I remember going down to his house in LA. They live in Palm Springs now, but I went to his house, and I remember walking into that house and being shocked, completely shocked. And I thought, this is so normal. I literally remember thinking they have a couch and art and a TV and a stove and a washer and a dryer and everything. There were no rainbow flags anywhere. There were no pictures of muscle men anywhere. It was just so normal. And I thought, how is this even possible? Like, this is just normal. Neither one of them are flamboyant or feminine. They're just two dudes. And that really opened my eyes, and pretty amazing, pretty interesting. Side note to that, and this actually happened yesterday, the joke with my senior class, Highland High School class of 1982, Pocatello, Idaho, there must have been something in the water because an inordinate percentage of that senior class is rainbow. I mean, so many people are gay and lesbian in that senior class. I just found out about another one yesterday who's dating somebody that was at the conference. And it's crazy. I don't know how or why, but we joke about that all the time. But so through the process, I mean, with my family, I wrote a letter, and I teach this in my classes, but I kind of did it my own way. I wrote a letter to my parents coming out to them, and I edited that letter for a year. And the reason I did that because it helped me to clarify what I wanted them to know, but it helped me to clarify what I thought, felt, believed, and wanted, and kind of my identity, and kind of defining and redefining my identity. And so I edited that letter for a year, and I finally felt like it's time to send it. Okay, and I said, please don't tell my siblings, which I knew would happen, but I said, please don't tell my siblings. Of course, 24 hours, 2 of my 6 siblings knew, and then within 48 hours, they all knew. And I found out.
And both parents were like, we didn't say a thing.
Yeah, they did. It's fine. But I called my parents and I said, well, I'm disappointed that you did that. Well, it wasn't intentional. They were really upset about it. And then they went from Idaho down to Utah to visit family, visit the kids. And you could see it on their face. My youngest brother said, you could see it on their face. And so I cried and he told me. So I didn't get too mad, but I was like, I can if I need to tell the family something, I can strategically leak it to 1 or 2 people. I know that in a day or two, everyone in the family will know, which I suppose is typical. So my parents had a hard time with it. They still have a hard time with it. Although nobody in my family is rude. About every 3 years, I get the gay lecture from my dad, and it sometimes is better than others, and we're kind of off, coming off of one of those in the last few months, and I think we've kind of come to a place of peace. I'm going to see him next week, and I'm fine. I don't tend to hold on to grudges or anger very long. But
So they're still in Idaho?
they're still in Idaho. Some siblings in Utah, some siblings in Idaho, and one in Washington. So
you start dating to the point where there's some spark, and
I did it for about a year and a half locally, and then I met a guy at a local party, and we went on a few dates, and I said, well, I've never done this before with a guy, but I said, I really like you, and I'd like for us to be, I tell you what I want for Christmas. I want to be official. That's what I want. And he was kind of sort of still dating, not in a relationship dating, but there was a guy that he had spent time with from time to time that was never really going anywhere. And so I was wanting that for Christmas. I said, that's all I want from Christmas. I want to be official. I said, I don't want to put any pressure. If you're not there, then tell me and we'll not do that. But I got home from my convention, my academic convention, and in November, like mid-November.
Of 2018? 17?
No, this was 8 years ago.
Oh.
13, 14, something like that. I don't know. Yeah. Doing the math here. Been with my partner 6.5. So 8 years ago, eight years ago, give or take. So I get back from my conference. He picks me up at the airport. He's got a card for me. I'm reading the card, and he's holding me from behind. I can feel his heart just... and, he basically said, I want this to be official and I want to be with you and everything. And I was so happy, and I was so excited, and, that was a great moment. And I'm not generally a real emotional person, but that was an emotional relationship. It's because it was my first. I felt truly loved. Not that my ex-wife didn't love me, especially at the beginning, but I don't know that I was capable of feeling that or experiencing that completely.
I think for the listener of this podcast who's in a mixed orientation marriage or understanding this territory, knows that they know that feeling. Often they'll divorce because they want each other they want to give each other the opportunity to love and be loved more completely, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt like this partner, this guy that I was dating, really truly loved me, and I think he did. And I remember one time we were watching the movie Rent, the musical Rent.
Yeah.
Of course, Broadway, right?
Gay.
Yeah, pretty gay. And I'd never seen it before, and I loved it. I was like, and I've been told it was lame by other people. I think people, my Mormon friends told me I was lame. It's about the transgender person. I'm like, and I saw it and I thought, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing. There's a song that they sing, that the couple sing, and it says, I'll cover you, I'll cover you. And the scenario in the movie, the play, is that one of them, the transgender person, male to female, has money, and the male does not have money, but he's saying, the transgender person is saying, I will cover you, I'll take care of you. And it's a kind of an upbeat, happy song and everything, but there's a moment, kind of the climax of the song, where you can just tell that there's love there and everything, and I lost it. And I sobbed. I said, stop the movie. And I sobbed, and he's like, what's the matter? I'm like, just a minute, let me just have this moment. And so he held me, and I just cried. I literally just shook and sobbed everything. And, we had a conversation. He's like, well, I love you that much. And, and I'm like, really? And I cried some more and everything. So it was pretty intense. And I hadn't felt that, I don't know, ever. And, I don't usually get very emotional, but, yeah, it was pretty amazing. I felt loved completely for the first time, romantically.
For someone who says your love is counterfeit or your marriage is apostate, how do you translate it with that feeling that you have right there?
They don't know what they're talking about. I mean, they've not experienced it. It's disgusting to them. I get that. It's icky. And people I've had conversations with, calling them on their crap, I said, it's disgusting to you. I get that, but you need to be respectful. And that was the most real moment, that was a real moment. And it was good. And he and I are still great friends. The relationship ran its course, and it ended. And literally within a few weeks, I met Chris, who I'm now married to. And as a relationship professor, I'm like, this can't be a rebound. This is breaking the rules. I can't do this. Chris is just cute, just cool as a cucumber. He said, let's just hang out. Don't worry about it. I'm not asking for anything. There's nothing official. I like you. I like to hang out with you. Let's just hang out. So I said, okay, let's just hang out. And so we did. And I remember on it was 4 weeks, this is so dumb, 4-week anniversary of my breakup with my first partner. Chris was with me, and I was teary-eyed. I was kind of mourning the loss of that relationship, even though I was kind of sort of starting another one. And I said, I'm so sorry. This is so disrespectful to you. And he said, no, it's not. It's fine. I was in a relationship for 10 years. I cried for 3 months. He said, just cry. And he held me, and I cried, and I started to feel loved by him also. And there was, we met in March. I think it was March or April. And we didn't realize until it came up on Facebook, where we officially became Facebook official,
Which is a thing.
Which is a thing. We became Facebook official on June 16th of, I don't know how long ago, 7 years ago? 6 years ago, 6 years ago. So we have 3 anniversaries: the day we met, the day we got married, and the day that we became official. So, but, there was a moment with Chris, and we were just kind of sitting, I don't remember, we were just talking, and I remember just looking at him and thinking, this man loves me so much. And he cares about me. He's so kind. He's so giving. He's so confident. And I learned from previous relationships, I need somebody confident, and I need someone secure in themselves. And that is him. He is solid. He does not have self-esteem issues. He is solid, confident in everything. And I looked at him and I said, I think this is it. He said, what do you mean? I said, I think you're the one. I said, I want to marry you. I want to grow old with you. I want to raise my kids with you. I want to retire with you. I want to be with you. I said, I have never felt so cared for. He's very caring, takes care of things. And, I'd been taking care of everything myself for so long that I finally had somebody come in to take care of me for a minute or two, and it was wonderful. And so we just, and then another moment where I got kind of teary-eyed and hugged him, and I just said, I don't know how I ever lived without you. It's the most natural, normal feeling in the world. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't want this to be a 3-year relationship or a 5-year relationship or a 10-year. I said, I need this to be it. I'm getting too old for dating. I don't want to be, 75 years old and single. I'm not doing that. I said, if we are together, we weren't engaged. Didn't consider that an engagement. I said, if we're going to be together, I want us to be together. And we talked about it and everything. When we first met, he was living in Riverside and I was living in Bakersfield, about 3 hours apart. He was in Bakersfield on business, and that's how we met. We had a mutual friend that introduced us and said, you should go to lunch, and we did. So that's how that all happened. But he was at my house. He was a regional director of operations for a company, and so he could work anywhere online. And so we didn't live together the first year of our relationship. I have a rule that I teach in my interpersonal communication classes. Generally speaking, and there are exceptions, generally speaking, you don't get married, live together, or engage in the first 2 years of your relationship. If you're over 35, year and a half, you're over 50 a year, right? Generally speaking. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, And, I get some resistance on that from some people here and there, but that's my rule. So Chris knew the rule.
Judge Judy's on your side.
Yeah, right, yeah, probably. So we dated for about a year, and he moved in. But the day he moved in, we signed, this is my old-fashioned Mormon side of me, but we signed domestic partnership papers that day because I don't want to judge anybody else for what they do, and I really don't care. But for me, I didn't want to be shacking up, and not so much of me or church or morals or anything, but I didn't want my kids to come to me in 5 or 10 years and say, well, you did. So that was my reasoning, whether that's flawed or logic or anything now, but that was my reasoning. So we signed that, he moved in. He's had a few different jobs since we've been there. But we were together about 2 years, and we drove up to Utah and Idaho to meet my family. And he tricked me. And we had to stop at this woman's house way out in the boondocks on the way from Bakersfield up to Park Cities, where our first stop was. And she's human resources with my company. I need to stop and everything. Well, come to find out, she was a jeweler. And so we drove up to Park City. We were staying at a resort, a timeshare we have up there, and he found this restaurant. Park City has these restaurants, and they're all long and narrow to go back. He found this restaurant that had a private room with a fireplace. It was in January. And so we went back there to have dinner, and it was great and everything. He started bringing up relational issues. He started to bring up, hey, I'm so glad that we're together, and it's just so nice for us to be together and everything. And if you're talking about relationships, I'm all ears. I'll talk about relationships for days, I love that stuff. So I said, well, I love you, and I know that you never lied to me, and we have no secrets. He goes, well, I did lie to you, and I do have a secret. And I thought, please, what could it be, He said that lady that we stopped to see on the way here was not human resources. He said she was a jeweler. And, that old Guido, he bought what he called a Guido ring. It was a huge gold ring with tons of diamonds on it and everything. He got it at a government auction sale. He said, I had that melted down and made 2 rings out of it. And I wasn't even thinking anything about that. And he said, and I got us rings. And he said, and then he pulled it out, and with such class, with one hand he opened it up and he goes, and I wonder if you'd marry me. And he just leaned forward and gave it to me. And I was dumbfounded for a minute, and I got misty-eyed, and I said, of course I'll marry you. And we were engaged for a year. And that was right when, the night before we met my whole family. So I thought, well, we're not going to share that information that we're engaged. We're not, and I didn't at the time. The one brother and his wife who lived in Idaho Falls, who actually did come to the wedding. But they've eventually found out. Of course, you tell one, and they all know.
Yeah, back to your family's history.
Right. So that's kind of our history, and we've been together 6.5 years, and it's great.
Now, you referenced a few times the Mormon in you.
Yeah.
Is there still Mormon in you?
Yeah. I'm not in faith crisis, and it's been interesting being at this affirmation convention and being on the Facebook, the different groups on Facebook and everything, the intersection of LDS and LGBT. I'm very interested in that, and I think there's just so much going on there that I still go to church. I consider myself active-ish.
So active on your own terms?
Yes. Yeah. So I go to church. I haven't been for a few weeks because we've been traveling so much, but the intention is to go to church. I want my kids to go to church. That's the rule. They go to church. So we do that. Things have been said lately from the top that are a little frustrating to a lot of us, and I don't know. When stuff like that happens for me, I go back to the basics, like Joseph Smith, Book of Mormon, President Hinckley, someone who I just really related to. I go back to that, everything. And I know there's all kinds of stuff about anti-Joseph Smith, or the church history this, church history that, and everything, and that's fine. And that's not my issue, and I'm not interested in proving the church to be true or false. I'm not there. It's my community. It's my tribe. There are frustrating moments. I mean, this policy and the policy reversal, I was an inch away from being excommunicated. That's an interesting story, but that didn't happen because the policy was reversed, and so it didn't happen. But yeah, I am. I have a testimony, and I accept a lot of things on faith, and I'm okay with ambiguity. For example, we don't know where rainbow people fit into the plan of salvation according to the church. I'm not worried about that one iota. A loving, very intelligent God has figured this out a long time ago, before the rainbow was even a thing, right? He knows what's going on, and he's figured this out. And
before I formed thee as a rainbow, I knew.
Right. I mean, I'm not worried about it. Loving God, his son, I'm not worried about it. I don't know the answer. I don't know the details. I'm not worried about it. I'm completely confident with full faith that that's all taken care of, and I'm not worried about it. I believe that I'll have every opportunity as any straight person in the eternities. I think so.
I think it's a healthy space to be in.
Yeah. And so I just kind of avoid the negativity. I don't really get into the arguments and the details. And I mean, one of the things that I posted on Facebook a few months ago was just my crowd analogy, where this side of the crowd is my rainbow people and kind of the allies and the liberal, progressive people that I love and know. And this side is my LDS conservatives, some EFY crowd and everything. A lot of them are supportive and a lot of them are amazing, and they're not on either side. They're kind of front and back, supporting. But there are some people on this side, like, how can you still go to church? That's ridiculous. A church that doesn't support you, and they're angry about it. And then the other side is like, how can you be married to a man you're apostate, you're, what, all the different words and everything. And my purpose for that is to encourage dialogue. I think as LGBT people, we need to encourage dialogue. We need to say to straight people, to our ward members, to our neighbors, to say, ask me anything. Even if you think it's rude or inappropriate, ask me. If it's across the line, I'll tell you, and we'll not go there. But I don't want you to hold back. Just ask me anything. I think that once we have those types of conversations, that it becomes less weird.
Is there an optimal setting for members to ask questions?
Well, I would welcome a fireside. I would welcome a meeting outside of the chapel. I would welcome a meeting in a home. I would welcome, ask me anything, I think, when parents first find out that they have a gay child, they need information, they need answers. And of course, affirmation, and there's several support groups that help with that. But get that information, ask the questions, try to understand what's going on. I think that's super important that people understand, because the more people know, the more conversations that they have, the less odd, different, weird it becomes. It becomes normal.
Once you put the seal of living reality, the face to an LGBT topic, hearts change and things become different.
And my students, my college students, they don't care at all. They don't care at all. It is 0 on the big deal scale. They don't care. The story that I always tell, I had a football player, stereotypical big guy, his best friend, who he played football with, who hung out with since 3rd grade, played football with. He said, my best friend came out to me last year, and the whole class, because he was so masculine and big and football and the whole stereotype.
Non-stereotypical gay.
Right. Well, he was straight. He's straight. He said, but my friend,
gotcha.
He says, my friend who looks just like me, came out to me 3 months ago. And everyone in the class was like, well, what did you do? And he's like, I did nothing. He said, I don't care. He said, sex and sexuality and romance was not part of our relationship before. Why would it be now? He said, I don't feel threatened. He's my best friend. He spends the night at my house all the time. We sleep on the same bed. He said, I don't care. Nothing has changed. And I could see light bulbs just going on everywhere in that classroom. Things like that happen. And I think that the kids, it's like my daughter, it's another story. My daughter had a boyfriend a year ago who was going to come over and meet me and the family. She's like, well, I need to tell you something kind of embarrassing. And they were talking, and my dad is gay and married and everything. And 3 minutes later, he said, what were you going to tell me that was embarrassing? And she's like, well, my dad is gay. And he's like, I don't care about that. It was like 0, no big deal. So there's stuff like that going on all the time, and so that's good. And granted, I'm in California. It's still conservative part of California, but it is California and not other areas. So
in the last few minutes of the podcast, tell us where you're at now. So you're married? Life is on a good track. What are you doing with your time? What are you doing with your advocacy?
I am married. I just feel so blessed. I'm in a great relationship, great career, great relationship with my kids. I am coaching. I guess I don't really call it coaching. I have been a life coach in the past, and where people would come to my office, they pay me $50 an hour, and I would coach them as a life coach. And I spoke at the Affirmation Conference 4 years ago, I think, the first time. And I had somebody come up to me afterward and said, I would love for you to coach me. And he was in tears and falling apart and everything. And I said, well, let's go talk right now. And so we did after that session, that workshop that I did. And we talked, and so we talked on the phone several times and everything. And I don't remember how it snowballed, but like a few weeks later, I got a text from somebody via Facebook again. Hey, I'm going through this situation. Can we talk and everything? So it's kind of snowballed, sometimes busier than others. Generally speaking, and I don't call it coaching because I don't get paid for it. It's not legal. It's not official. I'm just an educated friend that's going to have a conversation. And sometimes I have 20-minute conversation with a person, and that's all I ever hear from them. And a lot of times I'll say, I'm going to leave the ball in your court. You contact me if you need to talk. I'm cool with that. If not, I'm just going to kind of leave you alone, but I'm always here as a resource, one of the resources, right? So it's, generally speaking, the men that I coach or talk to are between the ages of 30 and 60. Kids, many times they're older, they're grown up. Married, they've been married 10, 20, 30 years.
In straight marriages?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, straight marriages. And they're like, I'm coming out, I'm gay, I don't know what to do. I said, well, there are several choices and everything. One of the things that has happened a lot is some of them will come out and say, well, I'm free of the church, now I'm going to do whatever I want. So they drink, they have lots of sex, and they do drugs. And about 3 weeks to 3 months later, they have an oh shit moment, pardon the language. And they realize, this is crazy, what are you doing? So I kind of try to talk them off of that ledge and say, look, optimally speaking, reality-based optimally speaking, what would you like your life to be like in 6 months? What would you like it to be like in a year? Where do you see yourself in 3 years? Like if, in a perfect world, a reality-based perfect world, where would you like to see yourself in 3 years? I'd like to have a husband, I'd like to have a boyfriend. Well, what do you need to do to do that? So what are the steps to get there? How do we respect the marriage, the current marriage? How do we respect the children? If you feel like the church needs to be respected, how do you do that? Everything. So make decisions based on your brain, not your emotions.
Great point.
And so I can't have a calling. I don't know if this is a calling, but I love it. And sometimes it'll be one person a month, and sometimes I'll talk to 3 people a day. And I think my degree in communication with relationships and identity study, especially sexual identity, kind of helps me to have the information and the education to kind of be able to help them, move in the right direction. And everybody's different, and everybody does, and I've referred several to therapists. I'm not a therapist. I tell them that flat out. And so it's good. I feel blessed to be able to have that opportunity.
When we talk about the sheer number of Mormon men who are involved in this topic, would you be surprised if I said there were hundreds?
I think there are tens of thousands. I think that there are tens of thousands, and they're everywhere. And I can't prove this, but my perception is that the percentage of gay men in the church is slightly higher than it is in the general population.
I had this discussion with Greg Prince during his interview, and it was very interesting that he said, when you factor in the genetic component of homosexuality, and then compound that with Mormonism's sheer ability to marry gay men into mixed orientation marriages.
Right.
If you understand that there's a genetic component to homosexuality, then you see that gay men passed a gay gene.
Right.
And so we breed more gays.
Yeah.
In Mormon culture.
Yeah.
Which I think is very interesting.
I do too.
But I also would agree with you. In my experience, we're not talking about hundreds or thousands. No. I do believe we're talking tens of thousands.
And I'll coach. Most of the people that I coach or talk to are in Utah or not in California. Very, very, very rarely is it local. And I remember several times I've said, you know what? If you could draw a line, if you're at the center of the circle and you could draw a circle around you just 5 miles or 10 miles, you would find 100 men in your same situation. Married, Mormon, gay.
I think they call that Grindr in Utah.
Yeah. 5 feet away, 6 feet away, yeah. But I said they're crazy. And one of the cool things that's kind of come out of it as I've been doing this for several years is I had a friend of mine say, I don't think I'll ever be happy again. He was excommunicated, came back to the church. On the day that he got all his blessings back, he called me or texted me and he said, I don't think I'll ever be happy again. And I said, bullshit, that's not true. You are going to be happy again. I said, a year from now, you're going to be helping me help other people. And that's what happened. So a year from then, he's helping other people also. So it's kind of snowball, we kind of pay it forward and we help other people and get them stable, and then they help other people and everything. And I think that's what it's got to be. And the networking has to happen. And this Affirmation and other organizations, Encircle and all these organizations, the support inside the church, LDS church, and outside the church are a necessity. And I think as our culture and our church become more educated, it will be easier and better. And, I hope in a generation or two, not that I want this to ever happen. I don't really want this to happen, but I hope that it's not necessary. I hope that in circle and affirmation and support groups are not necessary, other than the fact of socializing and being around one's own kind.
I say the same thing of Pride and a lot of the
great
the advocacy events out there. There will be a time, hopefully, that it's not necessary.
Right.
That everyone is visible.
Yeah.
And on an equal playing field.
Equal. Absolutely.
What is your advice to a closeted person who's listening to this podcast, contemplating whether or not it's worth it to leave their mixed orientation marriage or leave the comfort that they found or their desire to not disrupt the whole system that they've created when they know
I would
that they need to?
It would depend on where they are. Are they do they consider themselves bisexual, completely gay? Where are they on the Kinsey scale, for example? How many children are there? What's the financial situation? How old are the children? What's the relationship with the wife right now? Is it a good relationship? Are you best friends? Are you at each other's throats all the time? I would kind of, again, a year from now or 3 years from now, what is the optimal situation? And if that's staying in a mixed orientation marriage, we have friends that are in mixed orientation marriages, and they communicate and they're open and they work it out, and it works for some people, not very many, has been my observation.
Yeah, and statistically, there are mixed orientation marriages that work. Yeah. I think statistically they're around 11%.
Yeah.
But of those, there are some that are happy. And
so they have to decide that. If a person that's not out needs to decide that. My first inclination is to say you need to come out, at least to yourself.
Right.
And, to your wife would help. But, what is the reaction going to be? Is she going to be against you? Is she going to support you? How's that going to change things?
I think that's a very real point too, because if authenticity and honesty is the goal, there is an opportunity to then work together with a spouse,
right,
towards that goal as well.
Right. And so, and where are the kids? There are logistics. What's happening, but I think it depends on the urgency and the frankly where they are in their attraction scale.
Yeah, and I think you even brought it up a few times in the podcast, and an important point about happiness. Where are your levels of happiness? Are you happy today? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years? And those are all good benchmarks to help decide what that path should look like.
And I think this kind of sounds familiar, but I think that humans are that they might have joy. I think that is the purpose of our existence, is to have joy. And that's an umbrella. And in my opinion, the biggest spot underneath that umbrella is relationships. It's relationships. Romantic, friendship, family, work relationships. That's what it's all about. It's relationships. I mean, that's why I love Christmas so much. That's why I love Disney so much. It's all about relationships. You think about happy things in our life, and so many of the happy things, happy moments, happy experiences are all surrounded by relationships. And so I would say to that person, what do you want? What do you want? And what are you willing to go through to get that? Is it appropriate? How can we be respectful of all these different things that we talked about? The respect, the understanding, the conversations. Go to counseling, for crying out loud. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a healthy, intelligent, smart, responsible thing to do. Go to counseling.
And we can also have conversations about sex.
Right.
Especially in Mormonism.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with this, I'm not comfortable with that. This is my level of attraction. Yeah, of course, there's always the straight wife married to the gay man, and she feels like she's not attractive and everything. That's probably been hashed over several times. But understanding, I have friends that their wives finally came to the conclusion it's not me, it's not my fault that this person is gay at all. And so that's an important realization. But the dynamics for every relationship are so different and varied that I think each person has to figure it out. But I would say this: do something. Talk about sex. Talk about your sexuality. Make appropriate, respectful decisions on future. And make it do this the smart way. If it takes longer, then don't just fly off the handle. Do this methodically. Do this carefully. If you want to come out to somebody, if we want to come out to your wife, do it in counseling. Maybe that's the easiest, best way to do that. What does this mean? How does this affect our relationship? And explore all those avenues that again are different in every relationship.
And I think I think your method in just sitting down and talking with men in similar situations is an appropriate step as well.
Yeah.
Often we just need to share our story and
Yeah.
vent a little, and that starts laying some groundwork
Yeah.
to coming out to other people and now beginning that dialogue.
I try not to advise too much. I try to just ask the right questions. That's kind of my method.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah.
Any last and final words for the podcast?
No, I appreciate the time. It's been fun to tell my story, and fingers crossed.
Yeah, that's exciting. Thank you for sitting down with us.
Thank you.
Hey, Todd Jones.
Good to be here.
We'll look you up. California.
California.
For those who want to maybe chat, how do they get a hold of you?
Facebook. Yeah. Facebook. Send me a message.
Easy as that.
That's that easy.
Again, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
The Latter Gay Stories podcast, your opportunity to understand the intersection of sexuality and reality, especially as it meets right here on LDS Street and LGBTQ Avenue. We thank you for giving us an opportunity to share this story, and for you listening on this episode. If you are listening on one of the audio versions of the podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or another, we invite you to subscribe to this channel, leave a comment and a rating to help us spread episodes just like this. And if you are watching on our Facebook channel or through YouTube, we always love your comments. So comment below. What are your feelings about this episode? What are your reactions? And did you have a similar experience to our guest today? How did your coming out experience work? If you were in a mixed orientation marriage, were there some pitfalls there, or maybe some suggestions you have for our other listeners? Comment those below, and we'd be happy to respond to those and follow along in the conversation. The Latter Gay Stories podcast is your opportunity to continue writing your Latter Gay story.